What's going on, guys? So I thought it'd be really fun to do something a little bit different. I wanted to share my 12 favorite quantum, AI, and tech stocks over my whole portfolio. I manage over 40 equities, and these are my favorite stocks that I am currently buying or will add to in the future. And without further ado, let's jump right in. So at number one, and these are in no particular order, I'm going to go through 12 of my favorite stocks. I have Google, and Google currently, it had a nice little run at the end of market close on Friday, and its PE ratio is still one of the cheapest Mag 7. And Google, to me, is a leader, a powerhouse in the AI race. They also are doing a ton of rides with Waymo. They are by net income, the most profitable company in the world, and they're relatively cheap compared to other Mag 7. So right now, to me, Google, anything below like 100, 185 is a buy and something where I would actively add. And if we look back at 1 year for Google, we can see a story of ups and downs with a push here up to 210 before the market came down with tariffs. And one of the things I specialize on the channel is quantum. And one of the things that moved Google's stock the most in the last year was when they announced their Google Willow chip. And that's when we see this gap up and when they made their all-time highs. Well, they're still working on that Willow chip, just like a lot of the other Mag 7 companies are working on their own quantum chips. If we're just to measure out what the just returning to that would look like, there's about 17% of upside. And that's to assume that Google doesn't blow past that top and make new highs. So I really like Google at this PE. I would look to actively add to Google. And if we look recently at the last 5 days, it looks like institutions and buyers are getting more bullish on Google as it started the week at 163 and ended the week at 178. So as other people figure this out, and when people stop overreacting to headlines and they just start buying the company, looking at the numbers speak for themselves. Google has many, many pillars. And what are you watching this on right now? YouTube, the crown jewel of maybe any streaming app, any sort of creator participation system in the world, Google owns, and it's just one part of their business. Okay, my next stock is Nvidia. So Nvidia, to me, has always been a core holding, and the reason why is because they are single-handedly driving this tech and AI revolution. They're pushing the boundaries of what hardware can do. They're pushing the boundaries of what software can do. They're building the next generation of software and hardware for robots, data centers, the list goes on and on. We had a recent price target for Nvidia from a well-known analyst at $250, which would be a pretty insane move for Nvidia. From this point, we see that Nvidia has actually broken its all-time highs in the last few days. So people often are afraid to buy stocks at their all-time highs, which makes sense because a lot of the move has happened. If you look from April, I was fortunate enough to pick up some Nvidia in April when everyone was very scared of stocks and equities. I was like, give me Nvidia for $88, give me Nvidia for $94. So I was able to buy down here, and some of those positions are already up 60+%. But what happens from here is the real question. So in my opinion, my personal price target for Nvidia is between 190 and 200. So just to look at the upside from this point to something like 200 would be an additional 26% upside. That's if everything is to keep going well with the macro, and if we don't have any major war or anything like that, if the market continues to stay healthy, then the upside for some of these stocks is very exciting. If it was to reach that analyst expectations, which would put it at a $5 or $6 trillion valuation as a company. That would be a 60% move from here. So the question is, and the question that I'm asking myself is, are we seeing the start of a huge move for Nvidia to the upside? And it's possible. It's absolutely possible that Nvidia will make a move. It is a very valuable company. It's irreplaceable. So the next company that I am super, super bullish on is Amazon. And Amazon does have a PE at 36.4, and they have gotten a little bit more expensive. They're at $223 a share now. And we could see that even at the April lows, this stock was still pretty strong. It was still at a just shy of 175 a share. So as we can see in their earnings history, we just have increasing revenue. They have, of course, Amazon Web Services. They have their AI efforts. They have Amazon Prime. They have just an ever expanding moat. And if you're wanting to sell something online, one of the easiest ways to sell something online is through Amazon. They just have a huge audience. So I'm very bullish on Amazon. And my current buy point for Amazon is still anything below 250 or 275. I would actively be adding to Amazon. So historically, in the last year, we've seen Amazon touch 240. Let's go back all time. And we see we're starting to near all-time highs for Amazon. We're very close, just $20 or so away from all-time highs. And there's been a considerable amount of momentum that has come into the stock leading into the weekend. We can see those big candles, probably some institutions moved in at the last minute at the end of this week and drove the price higher for Amazon. I believe that Amazon is well insulated, and they also have their Zook cars, I think is what they're called. They're driverless vehicles. They're also that last mile delivery for Amazon Prime, where it costs them so much money. They're going to be innovators on that front, as well as they learn how to make more efficient deliveries, whether that's with drones or an electric vehicle fleet. I think the story is just starting for Amazon. Even though this company is so valuable already, it's just going to continue to be a cash printing machine for a long time. Okay, the next one I want to talk about is SoFi. And SoFi is a baby bank. It's a small bank, but it is an amazing, incredible performer in the stock market. And it's beat on revenue for the last 16 quarters. And they do all kinds of things. They do personal loan banking, credit scores, mortgage loans, refinancing, investing, insurance. Of course, all banks kind of do that. So what makes SoFi different is instead of spending money on all those big buildings, that Washington Mutual or Chase Bank that's sitting at the corner, you've got to heat or cool that building. You got to pay to have staff inside of it. You got to pay to have that building clean. You got to pay for insurance on the building. It creates a considerable amount of overhead for banks. Now, SoFi is mostly app focused. So everything happens on the app. And not only that, the app is beautiful. And not only is the app beautiful, it's also fun to use. So when you download SoFi, you have the option to invest via SoFi. You have the option to save. You can do all kinds of different things. And they're getting a lot of young, early investors who are going to eventually buy a home, who are going to take out student loans, who are going to take out car loans. So the business and their book continues to grow. We're looking at the all-time chart for SoFi. And currently, in the stock market, SoFi is at $17, and it's made quite a recovery from April lows. It's up almost 90%, I believe, from April lows, and it's wanting to go and retest this 52-week high. But I'm personally not looking at the most recent 52-week high. My price target is more like 25 to 30 for SoFi, which I believe would be more fair value for SoFi. And I believe that it's very possible that SoFi could do that if they keep delivering on earnings. If you want to see why I believe in SoFi so much, look no further than the money. Follow the money. The revenue has been increasing. When you tune into a major sporting event, there's a decent chance you're going to see SoFi advertising on the basketball court, at the football game. Their marketing and PR is on point. They have reduced their debt and they are increasing their assets. SoFi looks like it's going to be a monster in 5 to 10 years if it doesn't get acquired by a bigger bank. Retail has a favorite, and it's also been one of my favorite. And I'm so glad that BigBear is being discovered because I was pretty early to invest in BigBear. In fact, when BigBear in October and November, I was posting to forums and saying, hey guys, look at BigBear. And people were like, that's interesting. I'll take a look at it. But now there's kind of this aura around BigBear, and it's this AI company that is doing all kinds of stuff. They're in airports. They scan your face when you go through LAX or Chicago, Heathrow. They're doing national security. They're strengthening infrastructure. And they've had this really cool turnaround story that's starting to unfold in front of us. So their financials haven't been that great. Their revenue has been a little lumpy or a little flat. And they have a new CEO that has connection to a prior Trump administration. And we have an environment now where there's just a lot of spending on homeland security, on the border, and on defense. So this is kind of a company that is a younger company that has a lot to prove, but there's an opportunity here if they are able to prove their value in the free market, that it could be an interesting investment. So let's see how it's manifested in the stock market. So just looking at the last year of BigBear's price action, we can see that this has been a stock that has spiked up and moved down really fast. And we see that recently there was this $10 price spike. And lately we've had this nice little rising kind of support, this bull run, and this bounce off of the rising support where we ended the week at $5.84, where in most of the lifetime of BigBear has been below $3 or $4. So a lot of investors are starting to look at BigBear and maybe move into the ticker, whether it's a day trader, a momentum trader. There's just a lot of interest. And you can see that with these longer candles. You can see the size of the candle, you can see the volume, and you can see historically BigBear has moved up and it's also moved down quickly. I'm personally someone that is a long-term investor in BigBear, so day-to-day fluctuations don't bother me so much. But if you're a new investor or someone that's new to the stock market, this stock can be kind of scary because it moves up and down really fast. But generally since April, it has been trending in a positive direction. We'll see if that trend holds up through the year. So one of my specialties on YouTube is covering quantum stocks, and DWave is a quantum annealing company. There's many different types of quantum computing, and quantum annealing is essentially finding the lowest energy state. So they specialize in quantum annealing, and they're based out of Canada. And I actually went to Phoenix, Arizona earlier this year and went to their conference, and I got to meet everyone. I got to meet the CEO, the VP. I've even had the VP on my show. I'm going to put that on the screens if you want to go and listen to that interview. But DWave has had an incredible 2025. And I'll explain to you what has driven this amazing growth. So if we take a look at this last year of price action for DWave, what happened is in November, we had this quantum frenzy that happened where all these quantum stocks just went up really fast because of Google Willow. And then things dropped off, cooled down. But then DWave started making its own splashes, its own news. DWave announced their quantum supremacy results. So they showed that in a practical real world problem, they were able to prove and publish a research showing that their computer could do something that a classical computer couldn't. And their earnings looked better as well because they had a computer system sale to Jülich supercomputer in Germany. So their revenues increased, they surprised Wall Street, and the stock really had a lot of excitement. And it jumped up all the way to almost $20 a share. And recently there hasn't been as much news from DWave, and there's been just some sell-off, maybe a little bit of boredom and waiting for the next catalyst. Whether the move is down or up remains to be seen. So if we look back to November, there's clearly a trend in DWave, an uptrend. But the question at this point in time is, can DWave hold these higher levels as a stock? Would I recommend entering DWave at this point, at this price level? You need to do your own research and due diligence. I think that DWave has the possibility of going up. And I also think that DWave could easily move back down if they disappoint Wall Street. And that is a risk with quantum specifically, is that quantum stocks have a lot to prove. All right, let's take a look at a company called IonQ. So IonQ is another pure play quantum company. And IonQ is they're self-proclaimed the Nvidia of quantum computing. So they have partners like Nvidia, DARPA, Azure, Amazon Bracket, Dell, and AstraZeneca. And they release interesting research and they have solid revenues. And they're a very strong pure play in quantum, maybe the strongest of all. If we're looking at how this has manifested in IonQ's chart, we can see, similar to DWave, that there was a lot of interest in quantum in December of 2024, and then sell-off when Jensen Huang, CEO of Nvidia, said quantum computers are 15 to 20 years away. But since then, Jensen has completely made an about face, and even his company is looking at investing in quantum computing. So that shows you how quickly the story has been changing with quantum. I'm going to put a link up on the screen if you would like to go and look at that story. But since April, this stock has risen considerably. And I just want to show you that explosion from 1887 to our close has been 115% gain. And I'm personally looking at IonQ. My personal price target for IonQ is very, very aggressive, but they recently had an acquisition of two very important companies that are going to move forward their roadmap to quantum advantage. And the companies were Oxford Ionics and LightSync. I'm going to put that thumbnail up on the screen if you're interested in learning more about IonQ. Now, IonQ, I personally believe, could easily hit $100 a share. Now, I don't know if that's going to happen by the end of 2025. I think it's possible. I think that they have significantly accelerated their own timeline. And there are other publicly and private traded companies that are working on quantum that are accelerating their quantum timelines, including IBM, Quantinuum, and this race for quantum supremacy and who's going to be first and who's going to be best is pretty fun to watch. So most of you are going to know or have heard of Palantir if you follow the stock market. And Palantir is one of my core holdings and one of the strongest stocks by performance in 2024 and 2025. And Palantir is like a grown-up BigBear.ai. They actually have all the contracts. They have a stellar balance sheet. They're getting more and more deals, like deals with NATO. They're getting deals all the time, both with government and private deals. They're making money, more and more money. So they're in a period of rapid growth. So what does the stock chart look like? The stock chart is reflecting that rapid growth. As we can see, even in 2025, the stock started around $60 a share and it closed the market at $130 a share. So over a 100% gain. Now, for those who are really focused on balance sheets and valuations, this is a company that has a very, very high valuation, which means it trades with essentially the expectation that it will deliver perfectly indefinitely. And the risk is if they don't deliver perfectly indefinitely, then you can see quick retracement to the downside to a more reasonable valuation. So you find yourself with Palantir thinking, well, this is a good time to sell. I guess $20 is a good time to sell. It wasn't a good time to sell. $40, good time to sell. It wasn't a good time to sell. $60, wasn't a good time to sell. Now, this week, the stock almost touched 150. I think it was 148 that it touched. And the question is, how high can Palantir go? It's not just retail that's moving around Palantir. It's definitely institutions as well. So the stock is moving similar to Tesla. It has detached from its valuation, but can it continue its momentum is the question for Palantir. I'm not actively buying Palantir at this point, and I personally do not know the price target. I don't have a prediction for where this is going to go. Palantir continues to surprise, and it's been a positive surprise so far. I'm sure also it could be a negative surprise if they miss on something and the stock plummets. So that is the risk with Palantir. Okay, Archer Aviation, one of my favorite eVTOL companies. I invest in Joby and Archer, and I really like what Archer does on their website. I like how the CEO speaks. He seems like a visionary, and a company like this needs a visionary. Archer is the official air taxi of the LA 2028 Olympics. Somebody on my channel asked, when is Archer going to go up? Well, you could swap out Archer for any company in the stock market, and then I'd have to pull out my crystal ball. After IPO, Archer briefly touched 1864 and then sold down aggressively to less than or around $2 a share. And recently, retail has been very interested in the stock. It's been pushed up and it's sold off. It's been pushed up and it's sold off. We're kind of around this $10 point with Archer, and it's kind of hung around this $10 area for quite a while. And we also know that there's a pretty good sized backlog of orders for Archer. So it's just a matter of time before the stock price continues to work its way up and into all-time highs. My personal belief is that by 2028, if everything goes to plan and they are the air taxi provider of the LA 2028 Olympics, these things are going to be buzzing all over the place, and it's going to be the best free advertising in the world, and the stock is going to reflect that. So I could see the stock going up to $20, $40, $60, $80, $100 potentially in the next few years if everything goes to plan, and that's a big if. Regetti. So this is a quantum pure play. Regetti, the best way to think about Regetti is they are like very similar to the Nvidia of quantum computing. They're building the full stack, and a bunch of other quantum players are going to need to come to Regetti for parts for building their quantum computers in the future. They're building their computers in a modular and scalable way. Lately, it's kind of been hanging around 12 to 14, 11. It closed at $11, and there hasn't been a new computer sale, a new partnership, new revenue announced with Regetti lately to be a catalyst to push the stock up. But I think it's currently fair valued. And I think this stock will definitely increase and potentially retest its all-time highs when there are sufficient catalysts in quantum. So I love Regetti. I have a position for the long run. All right, so Nike. Everyone knows what Nike is. Nike just had a beautiful day in the stock market, 17%. And it's a turnaround story. It's one of the biggest companies in the world. It's one of the most recognized brands in the world. And from a stock perspective, they have been beaten to an absolute pulp. You could buy on Thursday, the day of earnings, you could buy Nike at 2015, 2017 prices. Think about how much inflation has happened since then. It's because so much of the negativity, the poor performance, the expectations, everything was so low for Nike that essentially the only direction for it to go was up. And you have a new CEO that has replaced the CEO that was here for most of this downfall. The new CEO has comforted investors, has laid out a plan to turn around the company and the finances, and they're getting back to their roots as a company. So what is called a gap up, so a huge move, and it really just is a thing of beauty. And in my personal opinion, this is just the start of the turnaround story on the stock chart as well. So if Nike is able to retrace from the $72 point that it closed at on Friday back to its all-time highs, that would be 140% return. So really impressive move from Nike. And I am invested in the turnaround story. All right, final stock that I want to talk about, and I think this is also a great turnaround story, is AMD. And AMD has actually been outperforming Nvidia in the stock market. So if we look back at the last year for AMD in March of 2024 was $229 a share, and it moved all the way down to $77 a share. And if we just on this imaginary blue line here is this rising support where essentially AMD has bounced off of multiple times when it's beginning its rally. So we could see something like this from AMD, where eventually it could work its way back to its all-time highs as long as AMD continues to innovate and be a strong player in the chip space, and the semiconductor space is very hot in 2025. All right, guys, we just did 12 stocks in roughly 24 minutes, 2 minutes each. I hope you really enjoyed this content. I cover all kinds of stocks all the time and specialize in quantum stocks. If you're new to the channel, please hit the like button and consider subscribing if you enjoy content like this. Let me know in the comments. All right, we'll see you in the next one.